Hi there, it's Linda from Wake and You, and I'm coming to you today because I have been asked by a couple of local nonprofits to do some workshops regarding meal plan and budgeting. We all know that the cost of food has skyrocketed and the instances of food insecurity is through the roof. So anything I can do to help people extend their small grocery budgets to feed their families or themselves, I will do whatever I can to help. So every week I'm going to put out a video regarding showing the items that I've picked up at the grocery store for a small dollar amount, how to prepare it, preferably how to store it if there's leftovers, because that's my hope. And I will apologize now for my cockatiel chorus in the background here. So the video today is just to go over the staple items. You can pick them up at the dollar store. You can get them cheap on Amazon or your online retailer. You can also get them at the food bank if you rely on those services. It's considered an essential item. It's typically a pantry staple that you can get in your dry packs from the food bank. And those items are all-purpose flour, baking, dredging any meat products that you plan on frying or wanting a crisper coating on, some white sugar, for baking, for adding some sweetness to pasta sauces because it cuts down the acid in the tomatoes. Brown sugar, although not essential, it sometimes works better in some of your recipes. You can use any type of oil you like. I tend to cook with olive oil, but if I'm doing stovetop cooking with a higher heat, avocado oil is great as well. You can always use vegetable or corn oil, again, whatever your preference is. We have salt and pepper, dollar store, it's very inexpensive, as well as seasonings. Whichever items that you prefer. These are Italian seasoning and paprika. I use them on an almost daily basis. But if you like savory or ginger or things like that, whatever spices you like having in your cupboard, go with those because it's your taste. There's also a couple of items that we do suggest that you have in your home. Some resealable bags, multi-purpose, obviously for keeping them. I also use them to pound up my meat so I don't have to go and buy plastic wrap. Aluminum tins, again from the dollar store. They're great. You can make a shepherd's pie or a lasagna, prepare it, put it in the freezer, pull it out for a quick meal. And leftover containers, whether you've eaten out and have a leftover container that you brought home, or online retailer or dollar store again. The one thing I find vital is the reusable gloves. We all have these after COVID. You can get them, again, dollar store. I use those anytime I'm touching meat. I just use it as my preferred cleanliness. Saves my hands a little bit of damage. So that's what you need. Anytime I use additional items that I assume are in your home for a recipe, I'll show you how to do that recipe without that ingredient. So as long as you have these items, you'll be able to do everything else based on the budget that I provide on a weekly basis. So join along and hopefully I can add some options to your menu without increasing your budget. Hi guys, welcome back. So I had mentioned in my intro video that I'm doing these workshops for people to help budgeting and meal prep. So yesterday I was talking to a group of people and letting them know that I'm doing one of the workshops for a group of teenagers, 12 to 18 years old. And their typical go-to meal is at a fast food restaurant. It's cheap and easy, right? Except it's not. I went on one of the apps and I checked the standard meal amount. Remind, this is one person for one meal, and it was almost $12. So I'm like, I know I can do better than that. So I went to the store yesterday, did my shopping. I picked up some pork, some potatoes, carrots, apples, mushrooms. And the whole cost of everything I purchased was $20.61. Grocery store receipt, local farm market receipt. So from those purchases, I have the poblano pepper that is not going to be for this recipe. One of the potatoes is not going to be for the recipe. And this group of mushrooms. So the total cost of the items we will be using today is $16.63. And that wouldn't even be bad if it was for one person for a meal, because it's only $4 more than fast food, and it's healthier for you, except this is for 4 people. And if I do this right, it's 4 people for 2 meals. Fast food is cheap and easy, right? Not so cheap. Join me in a few minutes when I show you how to turn this into a healthy meal or meals for more than one. Welcome back. Now we're going to get ready to start doing our meal prep here. So the mushrooms are needed for our second meal, so we're just going to toss those out of the way for a minute. And I've got a bit of a surprise for the apples. So when I went to the local farm market, I was able to get the potatoes for, let's check my receipt, for $1.75 a pound. So this potato is 1.1 pounds. So it was $2.05 for the potato. If I had bought it at the local grocery store, it would have been $2.99 a pound or $3.50 for this potato. If you can get it from a local market, please do. It supports local. It hasn't traveled as far to get where it's going. But if you have to get it from the grocery store, you can make a cut somewhere else in your budget, like the carrots. I didn't have to buy a pre-cut bag of carrots. $3.29 for the bag. But personally, my time is also of that value. So if it's within your budget to do it, it's enough carrots for 2 meals, potentially then some. And it saves me the time of having to wash, peel, and slice carrots for 2 meals. So I could have saved money by buying unsliced carrots had I needed to pay a little bit extra for my potato. But either way, we're going to use these 2 for our vegetables. We have our potato. We're going to peel it, dice it, put it in a pot, and boil those for a mashed potato. Smaller potatoes, I tend to use a paring knife. Just makes life a lot easier, especially if it has ridges in it. But for a larger potato, I would go with a potato peeler. Again, whatever you have on hand, whatever's easier, just please be careful not to cut yourself. The carrots, I'm just going to put into a pot with a little bit of water, boil those for a couple of minutes until they're tender crisp. I know I tend to hate that phrase, but it's just a little bit soft so it's not that hard crunch. We're going to add a little bit of brown sugar to make them a glazed carrot for your side dish. So we're going to put these on the stove, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes to start on our pork. And we're back. Now on to the fun part. We're going to work on the pork. So the reason the meal was able to be as inexpensive as it was is if you shop for the deals at the store. Unfortunately, there was a fire at one of our grocery stores here in town a few days ago. And as a result, a lot of people are having to go to what's considered a slightly more expensive shop because the lower price store is where the fire was, and they were shut down to clean the building up a little bit. So I went out with the full intention of buying items that would allow those people who typically shop at the less expensive store to get the same expense of a meal. But this will show that you can shop at a standard grocery store for a good price. So at the store that I shopped at, they had a buy one, get one free deal on these rib chops. Pork rib chops, boneless. So I was able to get 2 packets. The largest pack, which we're using for our cutlets, is $7.93. So the one that I'm using for the stir fry was $7.73. Obviously, buy one, get one free is the best option if you can get there. So I'm going to actually chop the meat for the stir fry first. So it's done out of the way, and it's literally just chopping and getting it ready. So I have labeled one of my resealable bags with what it is and the date. So if I end up freezing it rather than cooking it for tomorrow or the next day, it's available for me. So I'm just putting it in my holder since I only have 2 hands and can't do everything all at one time. And you just want to do a quick dice. If you have smaller children, put in a smaller chop. If it is yourself or teenagers and you have the ability to chew bigger pieces, do that. I'm very careful of how much meat I waste, but I personally will not eat that. So that'll go into my little compost bag there. My dog's going to be a little upset with me for throwing away perfectly good meat. So I'm just tossing all of this into the bag. Try to get them all relatively the same size so that they cook at the same time when you put them into your pot. And again, another piece that is entirely fat. When I'm at the grocery store, I tend to buy pieces that have very little fat, but you will notice that a lot of grocery stores pack their food so that the label with the price tag or the description of the item is over the piece that has more fat. So just be aware of that. If the tag is really large, you're probably going to get stuck with a little bit of remnants, but hopefully not too much. Also, when you're shopping for meat, unless you are planning on making a stock or something after with the bones, don't pay, what is this? $19.82 per kilogram for half a kilogram of bones. I try to go with boneless whenever possible. It is just, if I'm going to pay for my food, I want to be able to eat it. If you are making bone broth, if you are making a stew or something that you want those bones, go for it. I'm sure the butcher will actually sell you some bones. But for budgeting purposes, it is always best to go with boneless so you're not paying for something you're unable to eat. So we have our pork. It is ready. We will seal those up, put it in the fridge if you're making it tomorrow, or put it in the freezer. Toss this into our little garbage bag. So now we will work on our cutlet. I do have 3 pieces of pork here. They're a relatively thick pork. I could pound this as it is, but I personally like having thinner. So for this, I will do 6 cutlets. So watching my fingers, pressing down gently on it until I can get my hands in. Then what the chefs and all those wonderful people with accreditations call butterflying. You're just cutting it down the middle, and you could leave it like that if you were planning on stuffing it. I'm going to cut it completely in half. And instead of using wax paper or saran wrap or plastic wrap or all of that, I'm going to put 1 cutlet into the bag, grab my trusty meat mallet, and just pound that out till it's thinner. If you want it to be more of a real cutlet, you can use the spiky end of your mallet, and that just tenderizes it a little bit. These are really nice cuts of meat, so that's not necessary. I'll go through and chop up the rest of these. Be back in a minute to show you how to dredge it with just your staple ingredients. So, spent about 5 minutes chopping the pork, and I managed to end up getting 7 pieces out of those 3 pork chops. One of them was fairly thick, so I have a little piece that would be perfect for a young child, or put it into a wrap and have a nice pork sandwich. So now the step is to dredge these. We're going to saute them, fry them in the frying pan. I have this because I'm currently working on a convection stovetop, and only one of my pans works for that. So first step is going to be add a little bit of salt and pepper to the top of each of the pork chops. You only want a little bit of salt because if we put any seasoning into the flour that we're dredging these in, it is not going to work well. It's going to be overly salty. You can add salt on the plate. You can't take it off when it's already in there. So I always put a little bit on one side of the pork chop and then a little bit of seasoning into your flour. If you have egg or milk at home, you can always make a dredging station. So you would have flour, some egg or milk, and then another batch of flour. It just adds a little bit of extra crispiness, but because this is a budget video and I don't want to add any additional costs for you, I'm literally making a mess. Putting a little bit of flour into the dredging station. Again, little bit of salt and pepper. And this is where those seasonings that I mentioned in your staple, I like paprika with my pork. It's just one of those things I grew up with. I like it. Do it. If you don't do it. If you like spice, everyone in your family likes spice, or you're able to determine which of the pieces you put in the pan. Have the spice, add a little bit of spice, mix the flour up so that the spice carries all the way through. And before we start the next step, I'm going to turn this on. I will apologize that the fan is a little bit hot, or a little bit loud. You want it about a medium-high heat. I am using avocado oil for this because it's what I have on hand. Again, you can use olive oil or vegetable oil. Avocado oil just has a higher burning point. A warning, if you've never used avocado oil before, it could turn your food a little bit green. It's got a green tint to it because that's what avocados are, right? So we will let that warm up. This thing heats up quite well, so we're going to let that do its thing. If you're doing a dredging station, they always say dry hand, wet hand. If you've ever seen someone that can actually do that, wonderful, because I certainly can't. I always use the same hand for everything. And let's hope my smoke detector doesn't go off. So you will dredge one side, two sides, a little bit of flour, and you hear a little bit of a sizzle. And we'll end up doing these in batches with frying. Anytime you put anything in your frying pan, don't move it until it wants to give. If it doesn't move, like if it sticks, it's not ready to be released yet. So I'm going to put these three in, let them do their thing, do the next batch. When we come back, we will put it all together. Just before we get everything ready, I had mentioned I had a surprise for the apples. When I went shopping, I was thinking I was going to make applesauce, and that wouldn't have been a bad idea because the apples were $1.78 for the 2 apples. Applesauce, right? With pork, why not? But I figured, let's make a dessert. $16.63 for 2 full meals, as well as a dessert. Let's do this thing. So I have 2 McIntosh apples. You can use whatever apples are on sale that you like. I like Granny Smiths, but they were a lot more expensive than these. If you have an apple core, great, wonderful. They're a great invention. If you don't, all you have to do is use a spoon or a melon baller or whatever you have, and you will core the apple, or take the core out of the apple, because you're making a nice little hollow to put some nice yummy gooey goodness in. If you have marshmallows, because it's the wintertime and you have marshmallows on hand for hot chocolate, or you make Rice Krispie squares for your kids, that's what you can use. Just hollow it out a little bit. If you don't have any of those ingredients, just put a little bit of brown sugar or white sugar. Brown sugar just makes it a little bit more caramelized. Put a little bit in. You can always put a nodule of butter because that makes it a little bit more gooey. Again, I'm trying to limit what extra cost this is for you. But I like to put a little bit of raisins in mine. I always have raisins on hand because I like to put raisins on peanut butter with my celery. So do that, wrap it up into a little bundle. I will do the second one, put it in a 350-degree oven for 10 to 15 minutes. And again, I will put it all together at the end. So there we have it, $16.63. A full meal for 4 with some leftover pork cutlets. I'm not going to cook the pork today, so I have labeled it as mentioned. I'm going to put those in the freezer. I'm going to store the leftover mushrooms in the brown paper bag that they came in. They last longer that way. I can always freeze the leftover carrots or leave them for the kids for a snack. Either way, that is still there for a meal. If you want to put them with your pork, freeze them. You're good to do that. Just put a label on the top. So our meal today is a pork cutlet, or 2 if you're feeding someone with a healthy appetite. Some mashed potatoes. I just whipped these with my hand prop mixer, so they're a little bit creamy. Put a little spoonful of brown sugar on the carrots to make them slightly glazed. So you have a meal for 4 people with leftover pork cutlets, mashed potatoes and carrots, with leftovers for an extra meal for $16.63. And there's the surprise baked apples in the oven, just waiting to finish up. So fast food, cheap? Nah. I would go with this every day. Join us next week. Not sure what's on the menu. Sure it'll be good. So our surprise dessert, baked apple with a little bit of brown sugar and some raisins that I had. You can omit the raisins if you like. It just makes the skin nice and soft, peels away, and it's just a nice sweet little dessert. Again, included in that $16.63 for both meals and the dessert. Enjoy.